Bill Maher never imagined he'd end up at a private White House dinner with Donald Trump and Kid Rock. But when he confronted Trump about a possible third term, the answer shook everyone at the table. Bill Maher was 2 sips into his second glass of Pinot Noir when his phone lit up. It was a number he didn't recognize, DC area code. He almost let it go to voicemail, but something told him to answer. Bill? It's Bob, Kid Rock. That voice, gritty, nasal, unmistakable. Bill sat forward, curious. What do you want, Bob? Dinner at the White House. Trump wants you there. Just a few of us. Dana White's coming too. Bill laughed, thinking it was a joke. But Bob was dead serious. Wait, you're saying Trump wants me at a private dinner? Yeah. I told him it'd be good for the room. Tension, different views, whatever. Just come, man. You'd be surprised what happens when people sit down and break bread. Bill was stunned. Everything about this felt wrong. And yet, that same curious instinct that made him a career contrarian whispered, go. He didn't answer right away. He asked for the date, told Bob he'd think about it, and hung up. Then he sat alone in the quiet of his LA home, wrestling with a decision most people would never have to entertain. Bill wasn't scared. He'd argued with tougher people than Trump. But the optics, the audience backlash, he could already picture the headlines. But what if something good actually came of it? What if, for once, people from opposite ends of America's Great Divide talked? Not on TV, not behind podiums, but around a table. 3 days later, he stepped off a flight at Baltimore-Washington International and slid into a black SUV bound for Pennsylvania Avenue. The driver didn't speak. Bill didn't need him to. When they pulled up to the White House gate, a cold gust of reality blew through the open window. He rolled it up. A staffer greeted him and led him through security. He followed her through a quiet corridor, past portraits and polished floors, into a dining room with soft overhead lighting. And there they were. Donald Trump seated at the head of the table, Kid Rock already halfway into a drink. Dana White, arms crossed, nodding along to something Trump had just said. The room stilled when Bill walked in. Trump stood smiling that half grin he'd mastered. Well, look who finally showed up. I thought you were too scared to come. Bill, I'm not scared of awkward dinners. Just bad food, Bill shot back, shaking Trump's hand. Kid Rock chuckled, and Dana gave a nod of approval. They all sat down. For the first 10 minutes, it was small talk. Trump brought up the ratings of real time. Kid Rock made a joke about liberals and gluten. Dana checked his phone like he didn't care if he got caught doing it. But then the conversation started shifting. The tone dropped. Politics crept in. Naturally, not forced, not hostile, just real. And as the first course hit the table, so did the first shot across the bow. Trump leaned forward. So, Bill, tell me, do you actually believe this country is better off now than it was 4 years ago? Before Bill could answer, a server placed a plate of seared scallops in front of him. The moment hung. He picked up his fork, smiled without warmth. Depends on who you ask. Kid Rock raised his glass. Here we go. But the real tension was still simmering just under the surface, waiting for someone to poke it. The scallops were good, surprisingly good. Not that anyone really seemed focused on the food. The conversation had already started to shift into unfamiliar terrain. Bill scanned the table. Across from him, Trump held his knife like a pointer, occasionally gesturing as he talked. Kid Rock was relaxed, boots halfway under the table, sipping something dark from a lowball glass. Dana White barely touched his plate, watching the exchanges like a guy in the front row of a fight he wasn't sure he wanted to see break out. So, Trump said, cutting into his filet, everyone here agrees the border's a disaster, right? Bill looked up, slowly chewing. He didn't answer right away, not because he didn't have something to say, but because he knew the game. Trump liked quick reactions, interruptions, a punchline to play off. But Bill was a comic. He knew timing. I think it's complicated, he finally said. You want a real solution, not just a campaign slogan. You've got to be honest about why people are coming here in the first place. It's not just about walls and fences. Trump grunted. You want open borders? Just say it. I want rational policy, Bill said. Not a circus. That landed harder than he expected. For a second, there was quiet. Then Kid Rock leaned in. Hey, we're all eating dinner here. Nobody's throwing chairs. He smirked at Dana. Yet. Dana cracked a smile. Don't tempt me. Trump broke the tension by waving his fork. Look, I didn't invite you here to fight. I actually like you, Bill. You talk trash, but at least you're not a robot reading off a cue card like most of these other clowns. That's the nicest insult I've heard all week, Bill replied. There was a weird chemistry forming, not exactly friendship, more like mutual recognition. They were all public figures, all used to controversy, camera angles, and crowds that either cheered or booed. But none of that mattered in that room. Not right then. Kid Rock turned to Bill. You know what blows my mind? The way people act like we can't even talk anymore. I mean, we're not all supposed to agree, that's not the point. But the second you say something someone doesn't like, bam, you're a Nazi or a snowflake. I've been canceled more times than your last 5 tour stops, Bill said flatly. And yet, here we are. The table chuckled. Even Trump smiled. Then Dana finally spoke. We live in a time where everyone's looking to be offended. You know, like they want to be mad. I run fights for a living. You think people would want peace outside the cage? Nope. They bring the cage with them. That landed hard, and for a minute nobody spoke. They just sat there chewing, thinking. Even Trump seemed quieter, staring at his plate. Then he looked up. You know what I miss? He said. Back when guys could argue politics and still grab a drink after. My father used to yell at his neighbor every Sunday morning. By afternoon, they were watching football together. Because back then, people didn't confuse disagreement with betrayal. Exactly, Bill said. Trump tapped the table. Exactly. It was surreal. This moment of accidental agreement. A liberal comic, a conservative ex-president, a wild rocker, a fight promoter, all finding common ground not over policy or politics, but over something bigger, the idea that talking matters. Even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable. Kid Rock raised his glass again. To conversations people swear we're not supposed to have. Everyone clinked glasses. Even Bill. But as the wine flowed and the room softened, one question still hung in Bill's mind, and he wasn't going to leave without asking it. The second course arrived. Roasted duck with sweet potato mash glazed in something Bill couldn't identify, but liked anyway. By now, the formality had thinned out. They weren't stiff anymore. They were just 4 guys at a dinner table with too much history, too many headlines between them, and just enough respect to not start yelling. Trump wiped his mouth with a linen napkin. Let me ask you something, Bill. Be honest. What's your issue with me? Not the showbiz stuff, the real deal. Off the record. Bill leaned back slightly. He wasn't surprised by the question. He'd expected it at some point. You bulldoze the truth, he said. You say things you know aren't always real, but your people believe them. That's dangerous. Trump nodded almost thoughtfully. And the media doesn't do the same to me? Kid Rock jumped in before Bill could answer. Look, I ain't trying to referee, but let's not act like mainstream anything isn't picking sides these days. Everyone's selling something. Dana leaned forward. It's not just media. It's everything now. Schools, sports, companies. Everybody's scared to say the wrong thing. That's the real problem. Nobody's allowed to screw up anymore. Exactly, Trump said. You say the wrong thing once, you're done. They'll rip you apart. That's what they call being woke, right? It's not justice, it's punishment. Bill sat up. Being woke, when it's done right, is about awareness, about recognizing patterns of injustice and inequality. But what you're describing, that's social media performance art. That's fear dressed up as virtue. Kid Rock smirked. You just called your own people fake. I called everyone fake, Bill shot back. That's the era we're in. Left, right, middle, doesn't matter. We're all playing roles now. Half the time I don't even know who's being real anymore. The room grew still, not tense, just still. Because even the most cynical among them couldn't deny the truth in that. Trump pushed his plate forward, folded his arms. So what do we do about it? Bill shrugged. We start by admitting we're all full of crap sometimes. Then maybe we listen a little more than we tweet. Dana nodded. That's rich, coming from the guy with one of the most sarcastic shows on TV. Bill smirked. Sarcasm is a coping mechanism. Try sitting through 3 years of cable news without it. Kid Rock chuckled, low and slow. Fair. Trump narrowed his eyes at Bill. You ever think I'm right about anything? There it was. The real question. Not for laughs, not for ratings. Just a man, ego and all, checking for a rare second, asking someone he considers an adversary if he sees any value in what he's done. Bill didn't rush to answer. Yeah, he finally said. I think you nailed something about immigration. People want borders. They just don't want cruelty. You pushed it too far, but you weren't wrong that a country needs structure. Trump didn't smile. He just gave a slow nod. You're not who I thought you'd be. Bill added, still don't trust you. But I get why people do. Kid Rock looked between the two of them. This is like watching a bald eagle fist bump a vegan, he said. Weird as hell, but kind of beautiful. They all laughed. Then Dana stood and stretched. I need air. Gonna hit the balcony for a sec. Trump stood too. Let's take a walk. I want to show you something. Let's take a walk. I want to show you something. They pushed back from the table. The staff began clearing the plates as the group headed toward the hallway. But what Trump wanted to show them wasn't some historical painting or new piece of decor. It was something far more symbolic, and the conversation was about to get a lot more personal. They stepped into the hallway, quiet except for the muted click of their shoes on polished floor. A faint light led them through the east wing as a staffer trailed several paces behind, saying nothing. Trump was in front, hands clasped behind his back, walking with that deliberate stride, half showman, half general. He didn't say where they were going. He just walked, and the others followed. Eventually, they stopped in front of a set of heavy white doors. Two guards stood to the side. Trump turned slightly and nodded toward them. Lincoln bedroom, he said. You've all seen pictures. Never seen it in person, have you? Nobody answered, but no one had to. He opened the doors himself. The room was dim, lit by one tall lamp in the corner and a subtle wall sconce above the bed. In the center was a thick mahogany desk behind a red velvet rope. Framed under glass on the wall, the Gettysburg Address, handwritten. The air felt heavier in here. Bill stepped forward slowly. So this is where Lincoln slept, huh? Trump stood near the door, hands in his pockets. I like to bring people here when I think they need to remember something. Bill turned. And what's that? Trump looked at him directly. That even the greatest presidents were hated while they were alive. There was no punchline, no smirk, just that sentence sitting in the air like smoke. Dana crossed his arms, glancing at the wall. Kid Rock stayed near the back, oddly quiet. That's true, Bill said. Lincoln was called a tyrant, a clown. He tore the country apart to save it. Trump nodded. Sound familiar? Bill didn't answer. He just looked at the desk, then back at the framed speech. That's when it happened. You thinking of running for a third term? Bill asked, voice low but direct. The room shifted. Dana blinked. Kid Rock stiffened slightly. Trump didn't flinch. He stepped forward, slow and steady, until he was standing just across from Bill. I'm thinking a lot of things, he said, but we'll see how strong the country is by the time we get to that bridge. That's not a no, Bill replied. Trump leaned on the bedpost, his voice quieter now. They said I couldn't win once. I did. Then they said I wouldn't win again. I will. After that, who knows? Kid Rock spoke for the first time in minutes. If the rules get changed, someone's going to change them. That's how it works. Bill shook his head. But democracy only works if people respect the rules, even when they lose. Trump met his eyes. And what if the game's rigged? Then no system's perfect, Bill shot back. But undermining it because you don't like the outcome? That's how democracies break. Dana turned slightly. It's a slippery slope. One guy decides the rules don't apply to him. Eventually nobody plays fair. Trump gave a dry smile. Maybe we've been playing fair too long. That's why we're losing. For a second, nobody knew what to say. Then Bill stepped forward, breaking the silence. You know what the difference is between you and Lincoln? Trump raised an eyebrow. Go on. Lincoln wanted to hold the country together. You want to win it. Trump didn't argue. He just looked back at the Gettysburg Address behind glass. The words written in Lincoln's hand, the ones etched into history by a man who'd never seen Twitter, never made a campaign hat, and never tried to trademark the word truth. That speech, Bill said, nodding at the wall. It's 271 words. No ego, no slogans, just the basics. Maybe it's time we go back to that. Trump said nothing. Kid Rock cleared his throat. I need a drink. They all chuckled nervously, but the tension didn't really lift. Trump turned back toward the hallway. Come on, let's finish the tour. But even as they walked out, the air didn't feel the same, because something unspoken had been planted, and it wasn't going away anytime soon. The group moved back through the corridor, this time slower. It wasn't the kind of silence that demanded attention. It was the kind that lingered, heavy, like they were all privately unpacking what had just happened in that room. Trump didn't speak for a while. He led them through a side hall into a quieter part of the residence, past portraits of presidents most Americans forget on tests, the kind of hallway tour guides don't cover. Finally, Trump broke the silence. I don't hate you, Bill. You know that, right? Bill looked over, unsure whether to laugh or take it seriously. You're hard to hate back when you say things like that. Then you tweet, and it all unravels. Kid Rock let out a single dry laugh. Dana stayed a few steps behind, arms crossed, clearly still chewing on the third-term talk. Trump stopped in front of a window overlooking the south lawn. You ever stand up here at night and look out over this? He didn't wait for an answer. It doesn't feel real at first. It hits you in waves. What this place is. What it does to people. Bill stepped closer, looking out. So why'd you invite me tonight? Really? Trump hesitated. Then, because I don't want to just talk to people who clap. Bill raised an eyebrow. You could have fooled me the last 6 years. Trump nodded slightly. Yeah, well, everyone plays a role. They stood there side by side. A late-night breeze rustled the hedges below. Somewhere in the distance, a helicopter thumped softly overhead. I don't think we'll ever agree on the big stuff, Bill said. But I can't lie, this night, it's different. Kid Rock walked up beside them. I told you, man. You get in a room with someone, look them in the eye. It's not the same as trash talking from behind a mic. Bill turned. You think this will change anything? Kid Rock shrugged. Don't have to, but it proves something. People can't argue without burning each other down. That counts. Dana walked over now, too. The public wants blood, online, on stage, on every channel. But maybe people are starting to burn out on all the noise. They are, Trump said. I feel it, even my base. They're still loyal, but they're tired. Everyone is. It's like the whole country is holding its breath and doesn't know when to exhale. Bill glanced around the group. So now what? We post a selfie and call it unity? Trump shook his head. No cameras, no statements, no fake smiles. Just this, 4 guys, 1 table, a bunch of bad history and a weird moment of honesty. They all nodded. For a long moment, they just looked out into the dark. Bill pulled out his phone, not to take a picture, but to check the time. It was later than he thought. He had a flight in the morning. The studio would be expecting him back. Kid Rock stretched. All right, I'm tapping out. That duck put me in a coma. Trump smiled faintly. Thanks for coming, Bob. Kid Rock walked off, hands in his pockets. Dana followed, offering a quiet nod to the others, before disappearing down the hallway. Bill lingered. Trump didn't say anything else, just looked out, like he was watching something in the trees that only he could see. Then Bill said, I'll give you this. You know how to keep people guessing. Trump smirked. That's half the job. They shook hands. Nothing dramatic, no cameras, no announcement. Just 2 men who had said too much to say nothing at all. Bill turned and walked back toward the main hall, the sound of his shoes echoing softly behind him. But as he exited the building and stepped into the night air, he realized something. The strangest part of the evening wasn't what was said. It was how human it all felt. The car was warm, quiet, no music, just the low hum of the engine and the occasional shuffle of leather as Bill shifted in his seat. He looked out the tinted window at the streets of Washington, empty sidewalks, red lights blinking above still intersections. The city felt less like the capital and more like the backdrop of a long, strange dream. The driver didn't speak. Bill appreciated that. He wasn't ready to explain anything, not even to himself. He stared straight ahead, trying to process it all. The table, the talk, the Lincoln bedroom, Trump's non-answer about a third term, and the way it had all felt more real than expected. He opened his notes app just to write something down before the moment slipped. The scariest thing tonight wasn't the answers. It was how easily the conversation happened. The laughter, the agreement, the silence. He stared at the sentence for a while, then locked the phone. Back at the hotel, the lobby was empty except for a tired front desk clerk pretending not to watch YouTube behind the counter. Bill gave a faint wave and headed straight for the elevator. Inside the room, he kicked off his shoes, loosened his tie, and sank into the chair by the window. He could still hear Trump's voice, like it hadn't fully left the air around him. What if the game's rigged? That line stuck, because no matter where you sit on the spectrum, whether you wear red hats or roll your eyes at them, there's a creeping thought that maybe the whole system is frayed, not broken, just exhausted. He leaned back and closed his eyes. Kid Rock had said something too, something Bill hadn't really absorbed in the moment. You can only yell across the aisle for so long before you forget what your own voice sounds like. Yeah. He thought about his own audience, the ones who cheered every time he skewered someone, the ones who didn't want nuance, who wanted victory, not conversation. And then he thought about Trump's people, fiercely loyal, angry, tired of being talked down to. Different sides, same fatigue. What had this dinner been, really? A stunt? A gesture? Or maybe just a weird pause in the shouting? A four-man timeout from the circus? Bill reached for the remote, then stopped. He didn't want news. He didn't want commentary. He didn't even want comedy. He just wanted the quiet to stay quiet for a little longer. He pulled his phone back out and typed another line. Sometimes the loudest truth comes out when nobody's trying to win. He saved it and put the phone face down. He wasn't naive. One dinner didn't fix anything. No policies were rewritten. No beliefs overturned. No audience converted. But it wasn't nothing. It was four people talking, without cameras, without scripts, without the safety of applause. That had to mean something. Maybe not to the public, but to Bill it meant a lot. But he also knew that the story wasn't over, because the hardest part would be deciding whether or not to tell it. Bill sat at his desk the next morning with a half-drunk coffee and a legal pad he hadn't used in years. He wasn't sure what to write, not because he had nothing to say, but because he had too much, and none of it felt like it fit into a headline. How do you tell people you shared duck with Donald Trump and left with more questions than you came in with? How do you admit that in between the jabs and barbs, you caught glimpses of something eerily familiar in someone you've spent a career mocking? Bill knew the risk. He could already hear the backlash. He'd be called a sellout, a traitor, a secret conservative, or worse, reasonable. But what bothered him more was the idea that maybe he'd be misunderstood for telling the truth. He scribbled something down, scratched it out, then tried again. It's easier to yell at someone you've never met. It's harder to hate someone who's just poured you a glass of wine. That was the truth. They hadn't become friends. No warm hugs, no phone numbers exchanged, but they talked. They listened. They disagreed, and somehow nobody left the room angry. That alone felt revolutionary. He thought back to the Lincoln bedroom, the weight of the words behind glass, the way Trump looked at that document not like a tourist, but like someone trying to place himself inside history. That was the moment that stuck with Bill. Because for all the chaos Trump brought, all the controversy and confusion, he was still, in the end, a man chasing legacy. A man who wanted to be remembered for more than headlines and haters. And maybe that's what made the night feel so raw. Because beneath all the politics, ego, and noise, there was something profoundly human about four men from opposite corners of culture, sitting down for one meal and talking like people. Bill closed the notebook and leaned back. He wasn't going to make a big speech about it on his next show. He wasn't going to post photos or clips or try to go viral. Some moments don't belong to the internet. Some moments are meant to live in the minds of the people who were there. But if there was one takeaway, one thing he wished everyone could understand, it was this. When you sit down with someone you think you hate, you usually find out you were both wrong. He looked out the window. The sky was clearing. The noise was already returning. Emails, texts, headlines. The same old grind. But for just a second, he held on to the silence of that room. The weight of the Gettysburg Address. The absence of applause. The strange sense of peace that came from no one trying to win. He picked up his pen and wrote one last line. You don't have to agree with someone to understand them, but you do have to sit down and listen. And maybe that was the whole point of the dinner. Not to change minds, not to rewrite the world, but to remind us that beneath the noise, we're still capable of something simple, something forgotten, conversation. If that's something you believe in, if you're tired of the screaming and starving for the quiet truth, then hit that subscribe button, because the only way forward is together, even if it starts around a strange dinner table.